Thanks a lot, eh?
My pleasure.
Thank
I'll
you.
take this lens.
Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right.
Do you have an introduction or?
Well, slightly.
Go ahead.
I'm not on camera.
I'm on yours.
It's only you on camera.
I see.
Just me.
Just a hidden voice.
That's right. So I'm just going to rifle through some questions, but then I'm going to ask stuff outside of the questions, and you can tell me stories about your time in Harvard and memories of various
Be
people.
my
and stuff.
pleasure.
All right. Okay. So today we're interviewing Morley Wolfe, who is an alumni of a Harvard Collegiate and has returned to be interviewed for the 125th celebration. And I just want to get a sense of who you are, Morley, where you came from, and how you ended up at Harvard. So if you could take us back in time to your first recollections of...
I can take you back to the early 1930s. We lived in Western Canada. I was born in Winnipeg, and unfortunately it was during a time when there were Canada was in a substantial depression. As a consequence, we moved around the West wherever my dad could find work.
Mhm.
So we lived in Winnipeg, and then from there we lived in Lac-du-Bonnet, which was an RCMP base. From there, the next thing I remember was living in Regina, Saskatchewan. And from there we moved to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and finally wound up back in Winnipeg, where we were there for about 4 years before we came east.
And when you arrived in Toronto, what year?
That would be 1940, October the 22nd, 1940.
So we're in the early days of the Second World War.
Yes, my dad was in the Royal Canadian Engineers, and my mother and I had come east when he was stationed at Camp Borden. He then went on for whatever duties he had, and we found ourselves a couple of rooms. My mother had a bedroom. My bedroom was the kitchen.
Oh.
And we lived on a soldier salary at that time. I think many of the families were not in very good economic conditions in those days. And as a consequence, perhaps there was eventually a camaraderie as a result of the economic situation, a camaraderie between the families and the students and so forth.
And so when you first started attending Harvard, whereabouts did you live?
I lived at 250 Brunswick Avenue
All right.
for the first year, and then moved to 669 Euclid Avenue, which was much more convenient because it was only a block from the school and I could get up a little later.
That's always a good thing.
Yeah, I can give you one example of the kind of situations that we were faced with when we first came here. When we lived on Brunswick Avenue, we had 2 rooms, and we were allowed 1 treat a month. There was a woman's bakery on Bloor Street, on the north side of Bloor, between between Brunswick and Major. And they used to sell a dozen brand muffins for 44 cents. So we got that once a month. And then the price went up to 48 cents a dozen. And we didn't get any more.
No more muffins? No. And so if you could take us, so when you moved to Toronto and you were living in the neighborhood, were you at Harvard or were you at a middle school?
No, I was at a public school, Clinton Street Public School, for 2 years, grades 7 and 8.
All right.
I did my first 3 years of school in Moose Jaw, and then 3 years of school, I guess 4 years of school in Winnipeg, and then came out east and did the last 2 years of public school at Clinton, and then went into Harvard in 1942.
And when you left Clinton and came to Harvard, did you come over with a lot of friends? Was this the only high school that... Yeah.
The only high school that I attended, although I must admit at that point, my father was quite insistent that I go to Central Tech because he wanted me to learn a trade.
Ah.
And all my friends that I had made were all headed for Harvard, and that's where I wound up.
And you won that argument and came to
Yes,
Harvard.
I did. Well, he was away in the Army quite a bit, so
No,
I got to do what I wanted.
Oh, that's a good thing, I suppose. Now, so being at home, it was just you and your mom,
Just me and my mom.
and so you must have had that. That must have been a very close relationship with your mom and the community in and around here. Were there a
Yes,
lot of
well,
students?
my mother and I were very close. She was a very caring, intelligent. I used to refer to her as a universal nurse.
Hmm.
She looked after everybody, and she was kind and gentle,
And did she work outside of the home?
and no. In due course, to help out economically, she did work doing homework down in the basement in the house we lived in.
Oh,
I can go into that if you want. She actually was hired to make rats, which was a roll that women used in their hair.
mm.
And it came in a hairnet. She put these together, and then I delivered them to the person who distributed them wholesale.
Ah, all right. Now, I just want to ask a couple of questions about what it was like for your daily life at Harvard, or maybe the first few days at Harvard.
First 3 days were getting to know the school. It wasn't quite the way it is today,
Mm-hmm.
and the floors were divided, as I remember it, east, west, and north, 3 floors. So if you came in from the south east corner, the school rooms along that side would be 1E1, 1E2, 1E3, 1E4, so forth. When you got to the corridor that ran east and west, it would be 1N1, one north, one,
Oh, okay.
so forth. And then the same existed on the west side.
And while you were here at Harvard, what your academic experience at Harvard, what was that like?
The first 2 years were quite good. We had a series of courses. It wasn't just math. The first course we took, as a matter of fact, was accounting. Then math. I took a course in German. We also had rifle practice. There was a rifle range in the basement of the school.
A rifle range in the basement.
Yeah, we had 22 rifles. They showed us how to load and fire and aim and so forth. As a matter of fact, some of my cohorts won silver medals, I think, for marksmanship in those days. They also had a cadet corps, and we marched around the schoolyard in cadet corps facilities, and eventually wound up having a parade in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that all had to do with what was going on in the world at that time.
Right.
There was a world war being fought in Europe, in North Africa, in the Pacific, and so forth. So you had something to look forward to.
And what was the sort of the temperature of the school? I'm sure that there must have been lots of students like yourself who had parents who had gone overseas, or even some siblings possibly.
I had no siblings.
No, I mean, sorry, other students that would have had siblings.
Yes, there were some, but these were people they didn't talk about much. They were gone.
Right.
We knew some of them had older siblings in the Air Force and in the Army, but that really was not a topic of conversation. The war was something that was discussed at home.
Right.
There were few references to it at the school.
And in hindsight, do you think that was a good thing? That there wasn't an open discussion about what was happening and where people were?
That's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have a very good answer to it. The way things are today, no, I think it would have been an essential part of your education to know what was going on overseas. But that was left for your home life, and of course, I was a paper boy at the time when I delivered the Toronto Star and some of the old Telegram, and I always brought a paper home and knew what was going on from time to time. But aside from the odd discussion between the students, there was nothing in the classroom.
Okay, all right. Now, you mentioned that you took German and accounting, which I believe both those subjects are offered. I know German was offered up until last year here.
Right.
Did you take any courses that you could recall that you imagine that aren't offered today?
Latin.
All right.
I took a year of Latin, but I think I was averse to the not the language, but the system that they used in Latin.
Okay.
I preferred German, so I took German and French right through school, and wound up taking Spanish at university in due course.
And are you somewhat linguistic? You could get
think
through?
I speak Yiddish.
Very good.
I speak, read, and write Yiddish. I have a smattering of German that still remains. Ich habe Deutsch in der Schule gelernt. And I can still make myself understood in French and maybe a little Spanish, but not much anymore.
You could order a meal?
Pardon?
You could order a meal in Spanish?